So were you on the boat or?
Rum, women like sailing off into the sunset and everything. It's that kind of sailor's life is very romanticized, and it's all true.
Welcome to another episode of Bartalks. I'm here with none other than Ludvig Sääf. I'm probably not saying that correctly. I'm here in Surfers in Stockholm, in Sweden, with someone known as I'm making this up, this is not your nickname, but you are the crazy Viking ginger Baijiu expert. Where are we?
Temple bar.
The Temple Bar. And why is it called the Temple Bar?
Because it's a temple of Chinese drinking culture.
Fantastic. Yeah. And what is Chinese drinking culture all about?
It's about tea and Baijiu.
So, without further ado, this whole thing is done in partnership with my friends from 3 Cents Soda. I have some of our grapefruit sodas. We'll see if Baijiu actually tastes good with grapefruits later today. But more importantly, who are you? How is this a thing?
My nickname is Mr. Baijiu.
Okay.
To all people in the restaurant industry in Sweden. I am very passionate about this. More so perhaps than any other Chinese person you will ever meet. It is perhaps a bit of something to do with all the years I spent in China, like really getting deep into the Chinese culture.
So you lived in China?
Lived in China for 6 years, married to a Chinese girl, did medication in Chinese food culture. But then if you start to dig into Chinese food culture, it's unavoidably so that you're gonna start to drink some Chinese alcohol. Because Chinese alcohol is as important to Chinese people as, they say, wine to French people. Mm-hmm. So if you really want to understand Chinese food, you need to understand Chinese alcohol. How
did you fall in love with Chinese culture?
Perhaps you've heard about the East India Trading Company ships. You know,
yes.
Their trips in the 1700s and 1800s to China doing trade. There actually was a ship, a replica of one of those ships, that set out in 2006 to China.
No way.
Yeah. And
from here?
From here, from Sweden, from Gothenburg. So
wow.
Someone thought that was going to be a good idea to like dig up one of these old ships from the bottom of the ocean and do a replica of that and sail it to China along the same trade routes as the East India Trading Company ships.
How did that go?
Well, it did better than the original ship because that one sunk like 200 meters away from its home port when it came back to Gothenburg. I don't know. But anyway, so the boat sailed to China and as it got to China, it was a bit roughed up. And at the time I was working with wood, so I heard from a friend that they needed someone who could help repair the ship for the journey back home. And since I was a kid, I heard from my father these crazy stories about China and like all the mystique and the exotification of the Chinese world. I mean, I think every single Swedish kid has grown up with the stories like you dig a hole through the ground, you're gonna end up in China.
Yeah, I know the joke. Yeah, dig into China. Yeah.
Exactly. So very different from what we grew up with, would say. And so my friend told me that, okay, maybe you want to go to China, help repair a ship, sail it back home. I go like, yeah, I want to do that.
That is the most... 2006, Ludvig gets a call about repairing a wooden ship in China.
1 week later, I'm in downtown Shanghai on an East India Trading Company ship. Yeah, I guess you've seen the Pirates of the Caribbean, like that style of ship, you know, with the square rigs and everything. Of course, I'm falling in love with one of the Chinese girls on the boat, and hell breaks loose. But it was a fun time. And that kind of sailor's life is very romanticized, and it's all true.
It's all true.
It's all true.
All true.
There you go. Rum, women, like sailing off into the sunset and everything. It's a beautiful life. At that time, I was 19.
So were you on the boat, or?
Yeah, I was. The boat was docked for 3-4 months in Shanghai. And greeting guests and politicians because China had put a lot of money into this project.
Well, what is a tall ship? What the fuck is a tall ship?
Well, if you've seen the Pirates of the Caribbean, that is like the icon of a tall ship.
And these exist?
There aren't too many of them. And this boat that I was working on is called the East India Gothenburg. Okay. That is a one of a kind. It's built in exactly the same way as you did in the 18th century.
And that sailed?
It sailed from Sweden to Spain, over to Brazil, and then Cape of Good Hope, Australia, and then up to China, along the same trading routes as they did back in the days.
And what was your job on this tall ship? Well, you said you were good with wood.
Yeah, so
which is a joke in itself.
I was a carpenter assistant when I mustered on. But then he jumped from being just a normal deckhand, working a bit in the kitchen.
So what's the typical day of a deckhand on one of these tall ships?
So you work in 4-hour shifts. So if you work, let's say, 12 to 4 in the afternoon, then you also work at midnight to 4 a.m. in the morning.
And how long does it take to sail, say, like from... What's the longest voyage you've done from point A to point B?
Oh, only for, like, I would say, a few days at a time.
And what's the scariest thing that ever happened to you on one of these ships? Did you have like a moment that was like, fuck?
Yeah, I remember waking up at one of my first shifts, coming up on deck, and it's all blue. Like the ocean is like literally on fire. I'd never experienced anything like it. I thought I was going mad. But it was like, it's 12 o'clock at night, but it's bright blue, everything.
Wow.
And then I hear someone talk about some form of algae in the water. But before I heard that, I seen like these dolphins like jumping, and I'm saying like I'm just going completely insane. I'm going mad here. But that was one of the weirdest moments. I really thought I was going insane. It was like I think it was the day before we had another crew member who almost jumped overboard because he thought he saw something. Strange things happen when you're on a boat for a long time.
I've got a few people who work on cruises because they move around so much. They just don't in connection with what's happening on land. Do you have any funny stories?
I said that this kind of life is very romanticized, and something happens roughly after 2 weeks at sea.
Oh yeah.
Love starts to flow. No, but of course that happened to me as well.
Yes.
So one of the Chinese volunteers, we fell in love with each other. And as we were then sitting in the Shanghai port, a Chinese official comes on board, sees us together. She didn't like that too much.
Yeah, okay.
So the next day, they call off all the people off the ship. And it is so like, if you are a Swedish ship at a Chinese port, the ship is Sweden. So you actually need to show your passport when you're going on shore.
It's almost like an embassy.
It's like an embassy.
The land is Sweden, but on port you're in China.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, so that was not accidental.
That was not accidental. So they call everyone off the ship, including the captain, takes everyone's passports. This is like a diplomatic scandal. And it became a diplomatic scandal. So they get people like from the consulate like to come there and like to try to figure out what the hell is going on. Because no one would say anything. No one would explain that. Why are they doing this? But then after a few hours, someone started to talk and they explained that it has something to do with this volunteer. It's like, what's with volunteer? Yeah, well, she and that guy. I was like, okay. So my first job actually ended up being a diplomatic scandal because of love.
Well, how could that possibly... Okay, so these two people are together. Who gives a shit?
Exactly, yeah. But they didn't like it too much, which in retrospect, maybe you could understand it. But that was also actually my introduction to Baijiu. Because because at the time I wasn't actually not like drinking any alcohol. But when that happened, and they had handed us back our passports, but they told us like we're never going to see each other again.
Oh.
Then I ran into the nearest bar somewhere in Shanghai and just told them, like, give me something strong and local, and that was Baijiu. And since that day I was hooked.
So that's how you fell in love with Baijiu. Was that a heavy night?
I can't remember, but that's usually what happens when you do Baijiu. Yeah.
So where were you in China at the time? Like, what was the port?
I was Shanghai.
What region is that part?
That would be the Zhejiang region, Zhejiang province, East Coast China. So if you look at the map of China, it's sort of the middle East Coast.
Right. And what kind of Baijiu do they drink there?
Actually, they don't drink too much Baijiu in Shanghai.
Oh shit.
So in Shanghai, you would drink Shaoxing wine.
Right, so cooking wine.
It could be used for cooking. But
that's the one. That's normally how we learn about it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But that is the oldest beverage of China. So they've been making it for like 3,000 years.
Right.
Just that no one in the West has heard about it.
So obviously we're going to get into a bit more of the Baijiu, but okay, Shaoxing wine. What's happening? Let's look at the bottle. What's going on.
Okay, so Shaoxing wine.
Yes.
I said it's the oldest beverage of China.
Right.
It is a rice wine, so fermented from rice, like a sake,
Right.
but it's the predecessor of sake.
Okay.
So most of the fine cultures in Japan comes from China. Buddhism, tea, rice wine, it's from China. But sake is supposed to pair well with Japanese food. So you want that mild flavors, milder flavors of Japan. But Chinese food, especially this region, has more like pungent flavors, sweet, umami-rich dishes. Not spice, but umami-rich dishes. So you want a more
hearty sort of thing.
Exactly, hearty and sweet. So you want a more flavorful alcohol to pair with that kind of dishes. Because no matter if you talk about Shaoxing wine or Baijiu, all Chinese traditional alcohols are supposed to be drunk with food. Never before a meal, never after a meal. It's with a meal.
Right. Okay, cool. All right. So what do we have here?
So we have Shaoxing wines, which usually when you buy it, it comes like in a bottle.
Yep.
But if you have a celebration of some kind, you want to bring out the good stuff. And then you quite often you have these Taoist symbols for longevity, long life.
Perfect.
Like eat one of these heavenly peaches and you will live forever, basically.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah. All Shaoxing wines are aged at least 3 years and up.
Cool.
And you age them in ceramic jars.
Man came prepared.
These guys.
This look. Oh, holy shit. That is. You are very strong.
So these are Viking, you know. But these are a bit porous, so
Right.
it breathes.
Okay.
So the air will enter and then slowly oxidize.
So it's not cooked, like that's to keep it porous.
Yeah, well,
Sometimes claim.
the oxidation goes very, very slowly. Very, very slowly. But so you need it for aging at least 3 years, but usually more. If I would recommend someone who has never tried this before, I would say drink something that is 6 years old.
Okay, so 3 years and under is kind of.
That
Do you
one-
lose any? What happens during that 3 years if it's such? Because we're used to like barrel aging and stuff like that. So what happens in the pots?
So the color darkens
Yep.
with the oxidation.
Yeah.
And then you will start to develop flavors more towards like a sherry, plums, almonds, raisins. And those will get more dense and also more harmonious as the years passes.
Does it lose any like evaporation?
It does quite a lot.
Quite a lot.
So if you have a wine that is 12 years or more, then it's usually blended. Anything below 12 years you can drink it straight from. But otherwise it just gets too dense.
Really,
So you
really.
need to
Have you ever
build
tried
it.
any of the undiluted stuff?
Yeah, it's sweet. It's
Yeah.
really sweet. But the Shaoxing wine comes also in a few different varieties. So like dry, semi-dry, semi-sweet, and sweet. And what is drunk to 90% is the semi-dry version. And that's what we have here as well. Alright, so you're gonna start you off with a 5-year-old.
Well, that smells intense.
It's very different from the sake.
Obviously, you know, we're not having. You're meant to consume this with food. The restaurant is closed. I specifically asked for this so that we didn't have any food, so we can set up and not be rude and whatever. But so this is not the way you would traditionally drink this, right?
No, you would drink it with something. So when you're on the east coast of China,
That
usually
tastes a lot better than it smells.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
But you get these like sherry notes, you get the almonds, the raisins, but then in the back you get this sort of umami, like soy sauce flavor to it,
Yes.
which feels very strange for us Westerners to have that kind of flavor
Yes.
in wine. But they want this because that is what's gonna make this wine pair perfectly with Asian foods. You know, when you try to pair Asian foods with, let's say, normal wine, it's not really gonna work.
No.
It's gonna work sort of, but not quite. You have spicy Sichuanese food, and you bring in like a bottle of red wine with a lot of tannins. You're gonna go boom, and you're gonna physically hurt your mouth. It's like, just doesn't work. But because this wine has this umami note to it, it's gonna match perfectly. And then think of it in this way: you have a food culture that has been developing for 5,000 years, and as it progresses, you also develop a wine that is only drunk with the food. Of course, you got to develop that wine so it actually pairs well with your food. But then 5-year-old is still very young. And you want the older wines if you want to actually experience something tasty. So I thought I'm going to treat you for a 10-year-old. Color, more dark. Same producer, same wine. It says I've been aged for 10 years in these ceramic jars rather than 5 years.
That's different in its own way. And this is rice wine.
It is a rice wine. So it's made almost in the same way as a sake. It is basically a sake until the point where you age it in these ceramic jars.
Right.
That's where it differs mostly.
And is there different types of grains, different types of?
There are a few different varieties of rice which you use, but what gives most of the character is the style of koji that you're using.
Okay.
So in Japan we say koji, in China we use a chu. And it's usually rice-based, but different producers add also different herbs into this chu to get different styles of saccharification and then the fermentation. So you get different esters as well.
And that's super okay. It's still Shaoxing wine. It doesn't have a different name for it because
it does.
Okay.
Because it is so that Shaoxing wine can only be called Shaoxing if it's from the city of Shaoxing. Like champagne.
Cognac, blah blah. Okay.
Okay. So when you produce it from Shanghai, along the coast down towards Hong Kong. The rest of China, they don't produce it at all. They don't drink it. But from Shanghai down towards Hong Kong, along the coast, that's where you make it and that's where you drink it. But only Shaoxing can be called Shaoxing wine. If it's from somewhere else, you call it Huangjiu, which means yellow alcohol.
I've heard of this. Yes, very good. Okay.
Or yellow rice wine. That would be the same thing.
Have you had any Huangzhou that's good?
Yeah, sure. All the regions outside of Shaoxing, they are very distinct in their local varieties. I would say if you go down towards the Guangdong province, there are these black rice wines which are absolutely spectacular. They are usually quite sweet, but they have a completely different flavors from your Shaoxing wine. It's still rice wine, but it's just pitch black. You get this tar nose like chocolate coffee. It's incredible.
Well, you were saying that anything after 12 gets very sweet, and I'm like now thinking like Pedro Jimenez sherry, sort of like it's intentionally sweet, right? It's intentionally, but there they cut the fermentation, right? So,
or you actually use wine instead of water as a liquid.
Yeah.
So you start off with the wine, you add more rice to that, and then you ferment that, which will give you both more sweetness